Honestly, the targeting, just like what I kind of pointed out with your profile, the biggest mistake is always targeting. It's always not thinking from the perspective of who's going to be reading it, and instead thinking from the perspective of what you've done. And that is 99.9% of the time the thing that's going to get people from getting the right types of traction coming their way.
Okay.
Just because once you've created that targeting and direction, people will be able to find you and you'll get pulled for more positions. Sometimes there are things that are outside your control. If they see shorter stints of work as job hopping and you get ghosted without even knowing that that's what's going on, that's something that's kind of outside your control. And that's kind of why I mentioned providing some clarification on why that role was potentially shorter than a year or only barely a year. So that then you're kind of working backwards to think about, why would I get counted out? Okay, let me provide some clarification for that.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. LinkedIn. Undoubtedly, you know what this is. You have probably been on LinkedIn more times than you can count. It is probably the reason that you have as many connections as you do professionally. You've probably looked for a job, applied for a job, hoped for a job, all on LinkedIn. But how do we optimize that LinkedIn profile? Today, I speak with Amanda Rico, and I let her go through my LinkedIn profile and tell me every place that I could optimize my profile to make it more attractive to prospective employers, as well as recruiters and anyone else that is searching out my profile. This episode runs a little long, but there is so much in it that I just couldn't cut anything because Amanda brings it. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Amanda Rico. All right. I am here with Amanda Rico, and I heard about you. My wife actually sent me your profile on LinkedIn. She sent me a message one day and said, "Hey, you should check this person out." She'd been following you and she'd seen a lot of the things that you posted, and she was really just loving it. And she said, "Man, you should look into her," because she saw some of the things that you were posting about and knew some of the topics I was wanting to do. And so that's kind of how we got connected. And then I sent you a message, and it was great to just to talk to you a few days ago and get to know you a little bit and find out we had some similarities and where we lived and all of that.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
but for everyone's reference, we'll have you go ahead and give just a little bit of your background and what you do, and then we'll get started talking about LinkedIn.
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, Bradley. So just for reference, I'm Amanda Rico, and I run my business, Rico Editorial Services, where I build resumes, LinkedIn cover letter profiles for oil and gas pros. Typically, I also work with a lot of people in the broader energy and sustainability space, as well as tech. But it's all kind of framed around supporting traditional oil and gas job seekers. So, my goal is to really identify some of the key pain points that people are running into, whether someone is, a geoscientist or a drilling engineer or an executive. It's really about, how I frame the branding to make sure that they're communicating what they need to say to the audience that they're aiming for. So that could be any combination of things, based off of if they're wanting to get out of oil and gas or if they're wanting to stay in.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because there was a person who got a hold of me on Facebook, I believe it was, and was seeing some of the posts that I had put out there, and they were from Florida, I believe, and they were they thought their resume was not very good, and I was trying to find potentially a resource for them out there, but then what really struck me was when he said to me, I have pretty much exclusively done unskilled labor. And so my resume is worthless and all of these things. And phrases like that is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast, because I knew that first of all, I don't like the term unskilled. Right. I know that means you probably worked in a shop of a manufacturing or something of that nature, but I've been in a lot of those shops as a project manager, and I know there's a lot of skill there.
Right.
And there's a lot of talents and techniques and things that they use that's very valuable in other areas. So I love that you're helping people reframe what they've been doing. Right. I know my wife was in a similar situation when she was trying to decide if she wanted to stay in oil and gas, and it was pretty specialized as a geological technician.
Yes, very specialized, yeah.
And as we were discussing it, we were thinking, well, shoot, you're at the end of the day, you're a data analyst.
Exactly.
Is what you are.
Right.
And so I love that you're helping people rephrase that, but
yeah. And that is really, really common, especially I've worked with a lot of geoscientists and people and geomechanics, geotechs, things like that. And it can be really tricky for them because even in oil and gas, a lot of people will still see the geofocused content as being like Greek. They still don't fully understand or appreciate kind of what geoscientists do. So yeah, absolutely. A lot of the geos I've worked with, or geotechs I've worked with have shifted over to the data management, data analytics or data analysis side successfully, because a lot of what they're doing is, strategic problem solving, right? Analytical problem solving. And also they have direct business applications associated with what they do. It's not just looking at data, cleaning it, creating visualization, mapping, stuff like that. It goes beyond that.
Yeah. So when we got to talking, the biggest topic that we could think of was LinkedIn. I mean, everyone uses LinkedIn at this point. It's because of LinkedIn that I wanted to do this podcast. It was posts that I was seeing of people that were struggling, 16 months, 18 months. I saw a person that was 27 months unemployed trying to find a job. And I just know that, LinkedIn is a very valuable tool. I've gotten a couple jobs through LinkedIn. I've been ghosted a lot on LinkedIn.
Yes, expect the ghosting.
Right. But I knew that there's obvious ways that you can optimize your profile to help people find you, help people know exactly what you are. And to your point, be able to rephrase your skills and what you've done to be able to do that. So, but before we get into kind of my profile and I let you tear it apart if it stinks, let's talk about LinkedIn a little bit, because it's been around for quite a long time now. Yes. I know at least, I don't even know when it was founded, but I know like in 2015, it was going strong when I was laid off the first time.
Right.
So what exactly is LinkedIn? What is it used for mostly? And how has it kind of evolved over the years?
LinkedIn definitely took off significantly more during and after COVID. So before that, I was noticing that LinkedIn wasn't quite as significant. It was still important for job seekers, but it wasn't kind of the powerhouse that it is today in terms of needing to brand yourself or else you look like a really weird candidate. You want to make sure that you have some kind of presence on LinkedIn now. And a lot of that was due to people being furloughed, laid off, really just struggling with finding a new role and then taking the time to completely optimize their LinkedIn profiles and redo their resumes and do the whole trifecta of, their job seeking materials during COVID. So, you have millions more people who joined LinkedIn, who updated their profiles. And LinkedIn is also constantly evolving in terms of the new applications and the new upgrades that it's doing. It's not always the most intuitive platform. It's not quite as intuitive as a lot of the other platforms, especially for oil and gas. There are a lot of times where I try to find certain key skills that just aren't there, and you can't create your own, really, because if you do it that way, then you're not going to get found. So yeah, LinkedIn is unique. And I think that the best way to think about it is like a giant networking event where you're trying to create a profile that invites people to come and talk to you. So think of yourself as being at like, the OTC event, right? If you've ever experienced the Offshore Technology Conference, it's enormous, or something similar to that at one of your giant, conference centers. And think of your LinkedIn profile as being kind of that piece that you at a kiosk, right? Where you're kind of standing there hoping or expecting that people will come and talk to you. It kind of needs to fulfill the role of a resume, a bio, a 30-second elevator pitch. It needs to have a little personality, but it also needs to be pretty direct about where you want to go next, not just where you've been.
Mm. And have you found, so one thing that LinkedIn does that I've found to be a little bit annoying is, they really want you to buy premium.
Oh, yeah.
And now they just switched this recently, I've noticed, where you'll get a notification that, 4 different people's viewed your profile. But if you try to click on that now it says, unless you pay, you're not going to see who they were.
Right.
And before it was just people that had the recruiter title, you couldn't see them, or specific people that had turned that off,
right.
You couldn't see them. But if you found premium to really be worth the money for someone who specifically is going through a job search?
Yes, it is worth it. So the reason why is, of course, you want to see your profile views. I've had a lot of clients who have been able to start conversations that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to start if they didn't see who was looking at their profiles. Being able to see, of course, recruiters or HR pros looking at their profiles, even sometimes people who would be their direct supervisors or the CEOs or COOs of companies. That's also really critical to see. I once had a client who was a senior level landman who saw the CEO of a geothermal company looking at his profile, and he reached out to him and he got a job, ended up getting a job. So, there's the work of having your profile optimized is so that you get people coming to your profile, but they're not always going to be the ones to extend the hand first. You're drawing them. If you want to be weird about it, you could think of it as kind of thinking of your profile as like that light that draws mosquitoes to it, right? You're kind of like, all right, come here, come over here. And once you get them there, then you get to have conversations with them, or at least start conversations. But yes, premium is worth it. You get more in-mail credits as well, to where you can reach out to people who aren't within your direct connection, web or kind of environment. So that's important. You also want to be able to have access to looking at people's profiles yourself as well, and to kind of think through how reaching out to people, being able to see the views, being able to look at some of the analytics behind your profile being viewed. If it's gone up based off of some of the changes you've made, that can also be really helpful to have the analytics behind that. And Premium offers that, those options.
Nice. Yeah, the in-mail credits are probably the biggest feature that I have ever used whenever I've had it. More so than anything else. I know looking at profiles is nice just to see who they are and to try to reach out to them. But I know the in-mail credits really were great as I was first starting out, especially in the search of trying to reach out to all these different people that I may have known, or I knew people that they knew, and trying to build a little bit more of a network that was a little bit wider reaching than just direct colleagues that I had worked with before. So I was just curious because I've seen some people love it. Some people hate it. Some people are annoyed, which I'm kind of in that camp of, it seems like they are just they're trying to push you to that. So they're taking away things from the free version in order to almost force you to buy the premium. And so that's a little bit of a, I get it. That's their business model.
It is a service. Yeah. LinkedIn is a service. It's not just a social media platform like Facebook or Twitter. It's not just about connecting. It also has direct applications to getting jobs, right? So that's kind of where I think they're starting to pick up on just how many people are on LinkedIn, and that if they want to make more revenue from this, because I think LinkedIn is owned by Microsoft. So I'm sure they have a pretty strong business model in terms of thinking through how to leverage LinkedIn.
Sure. And I know you do got to be a little bit careful on LinkedIn too, because there are fake jobs out there. And I know that from direct experience, because when I made the profile page for this podcast, I didn't realize you had to set the email address that could set a job. So before I could get that set, someone posted a fake job on my company page. And even after I told LinkedIn, hey, this wasn't me, I'm the only person, they won't take it down.
Yeah.
They said it doesn't violate any kind of their laws. And so you do have to be careful looking at it. But by and large, it is a tremendous service that is great in the professional space. But
and LinkedIn is trying to create some workarounds for that by doing the verifications, company verifications and things like that. I don't know how useful or effective it's going to be, because I mean these fake job postings they're pretty common. So yeah, you do want to be careful, and that's honestly why sometimes I always recommend going over to the company itself, going over to their career section and double checking, and applying directly through the company. If you see it listed on LinkedIn, it should also be listed on the company website. So you may run into situations here and there where, an HR department has posted more things on LinkedIn, but usually you can reach out and make sure that that's a real role.
Yeah, that's good to know. And, I also just learned that sometimes when you see something that's been reposted weeks later, months later, that doesn't necessarily mean they reopened it. They may have just forgot to turn it off.
Yes, that is so
which
common.
Is something.
Yes.
Right. And that's frustrating, because it just got reposted. It shows us it's a new one, but you have to kind of pay attention to what it says there. And if it says reposted, you can still apply for it, but just know that it could be something that's been filled for a long time, and you're not gonna get anywhere with that.
Exactly. Yeah, it does get really frustrating. Yeah.
Okay, so profiles. So when we first talked, I told you we can use mine, and you're not gonna hurt my feelings. Tell me what stinks. So I'll go ahead and share this, and we can look at mine. I've done some revamps to it, so some of it may be good, some of it may be bad, and we can go through the sections. And if you can kind of help us all out with that. Let me get over to this. Okay, so this is what mine currently looks like. So awesome. From what you see right here, what do you see that you like, don't like? What do you?
So what I like just right off the bat, I like that you've created a visual, right, with the banner, by clarifying that you're a senior project manager. Is that the only goal that you have in terms of job seeking right now, just project management?
No, actually not necessarily. So I have experience mostly as a project manager. I have almost 15 years in project management. I have a couple years in marketing. But I think I put it like that because I'm far more marketable as a project manager to potential companies. I have other things that I love to do, like the marketing. I did content marketing and things like that for a couple of years, and I would love to get into that. And then I was in consulting for the last 3 years and my last title was a senior consultant. But I think I used it for marketability was what my thought was, but tell me if that's not right.
So I think you just want to be mindful that when you say consultant, you want to clarify what type of consultant you're talking about as well, right? Consulting is huge, super, super broad, could be business consulting, could be IT, could be, all over the place. So you want to have some clarity on what you mean by consulting. I see that in your headline here, the one that says, senior project manager, senior consultant, IT consulting. That's excellent. But you want to have some clarity on what you mean, because you want to think of it from the perspective of you're starting a conversation with an HR pro or a recruiter. First thing that they're going to ask you is, where do you want me to put you? Right? If that's the first question they're going to ask, you want to have clarity on where you want to be put. The senior project manager thing, that is the clearest link to where you want to be. And so they're probably going to latch onto that. They're going to think through, most likely, okay, so senior project management within IT, because you have IT linked here, and then you have senior consultant, then you have consulting. So what they're thinking more than likely is, are you wanting to be a PM consultant for the IT space? Is that correct?
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, then that's good. You just kind of want to think of it from the perspective of your audience, right? Instead of thinking it from the perspective of, okay, here's what I've done. Here is, a word salad of the things that I've done. Figure it out for me. You want to think from the perspective of any red flags, any gaps, any things that you may not be being very clear on. And then make sure that you have a very concise idea of how to communicate that to an audience who is going to be completely ignorant about what you do and how you do it. So that would be kind of my recommendation. Usually what I do, this banner here with Bradley Stair, Senior Project Manager, there are times where instead of, because they already see your name as Bradley Stair, right? So sometimes I'll just create a banner that has the specific strengths or skill sets of what someone brings to the table. And that kind of helps clarify where they fit and what strengths they're bringing to the table for senior project management or for consulting or whatever their direction is. I do like that you have your email. You're wanting to stay in Edmond, right?
I'm needing to stay here physically. Yeah.
Okay.
My wife works here in the city.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Because if you're open to relocation, then I would definitely not suggest just putting Edmond there, because any recruiter is going to make the assumption that if you put that you're in Edmond, that you want to stay in Edmond and that you're not open to remote or relocation or travel or anything like that. So if you are open to things like remote, you might want to clarify open to remote. That can be helpful. A lot of the recruiters that I chat with, I was chatting with one the other day and she was mentioning, please, whenever you're working with clients, if they're open to relocation to somewhere like Denver, have them put that at the top, because if they don't put that there, then I just assume they're not open to it. And I'm going to go with the candidate that's in Denver, So you want to be very clear. Clarity is kind of the name of the game whenever you're in a job seeking situation.
Yeah, I love that. I've actually worked remote the last 3 jobs I've had. I love it. And I'm actually kind of in need of that because school here is at really bad times for working parents.
Yeah.
The elementary school starts at 9 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
And ends at 4. So it's weird. It's a really bad time for both parents to be working. So one of us needs to have that flexibility to be able to at least take her. Now, luckily the school is in our neighborhood, so it's about a 15-minute walk, but total. But I need to have that. So I love that you said that. I'll make sure that I change that. Now, one thing that I do have, and I don't know if other people will have a similar thing as me, I've had a interesting career in that I have been in multiple industries at this point. I started out in oil and gas, working oil and gas services at Baker Hughes, moved into manufacturing, and manufacturing covered wastewater and some other industries, and then got into IT. But I've had upper education IT experience as a PM. So my PM experience ranges from manufacturing to consulting to IT to upper education.
Right.
So I have that. Would you say that like the headline where I have senior project manager, senior consultant, do I need to make sure I have those industries there in what I have experience in, or what would be your recommendation there?
If you're wanting to clarify that you could work in any number of those sectors, then yes. And actually, what I would suggest is something similar to senior project manager, senior project manager and consultant, right? And then clarify 15 plus years of project management experience in XYZ sectors, executing projects ranging from 20K to 5 million. Okay. So you kind of want to create a value statement. That's kind of that really quick pitch, right? Basically like an elevator pitch that you're providing clarity to an HR pro or recruiter of what is the value you are bringing as a candidate, right? I think it's very smart, since you're in the PM space, that you're clarifying the range of projects. That's really, really good, because a lot of them will be asking that question anyway. What's been your minimum to max CapEx? That's going to be really important, because you want to think about it from the perspective of what is the ultimate goal of my job? Like why does this job exist? So if the reason why my job exists is to execute as flawless as possible, scope, schedule, cost for capital projects in manufacturing or IT or oil and gas or whatever the case may be, then that's what I need to convey, right? How do I do that better than another candidate? So that's the goal, right? Is that you're kind of trying to get that across in a way where someone who doesn't know you would want to have a conversation with you about that.
Okay. Is there anything else that you see in this area that would be better optimized for people looking at my profile?
No, you have a nice clean photo. You're smiling for the camera. It's in color. I also like, since you are a job seeker, that you're not necessarily including details about your podcast in the headline. I think that's smart, because if you are a job seeker, you don't want to muddy the water.
Right.
You don't want to give them the impression that you can run your own business and you're no longer interested in corporate, work. So I think that that's smart. The open to work, I know you have project management or project manager, senior consultant, analyst. What other ones do you have there? An analyst. Okay, so you didn't mention anything about being an analyst in your headline. What is the analyst piece here?
So to be honest, I probably could go ahead and take that off. I was doing assessments at my last position.
Okay.
For small to mid-size oil and gas companies and their data management practices. And so I have done, in multiple of the jobs that I've had, I've been a PM and a business analyst. But I don't have as much experience as a business analyst. It's kind of learn as you go and try, succeed, fail, fix it, learn as, Google things sometimes as
Right.
far as what the analyst would do in this situation or flow charts or different things like that. But I have done it. So I was probably either thinking business analyst or the last job.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't necessarily what I'm going for. So
Exactly.
you would
That's the
probably tell me to take that
perspective
off.
I would take it off. Yeah. So you don't just want to think from the perspective, if there's any mantra you want to take away from this, it is don't put content on there that has to do with where you've been. Put content on there that has to do with where you want to be going forward. Just because you've done it before doesn't mean that you want to continue doing it or do it again. So, and I know that can get tricky for job seekers, especially when they feel like they're not getting traction for positions.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I would mention about the titles that you have here is that you may want to provide some clarity or add other ones, right? Because you can add, I think, up to 5.
I think
So
you're right.
adding senior project manager, that's one that you can add. Let's see. You
I
may
think
have to
maybe
spell
it
out
didn't.
senior. Yeah,
Yeah,
there
there
it
you go.
is. Yeah, avoid
Would you
using
suggest having that
acronyms.
one on here and taking this one off, or
You
does
can
it
include
matter?
both of them if you want. There's no harm in doing that. Just know that the ones that come your way for project manager, if you have a salary range that you're very clear that you want to stay in, and you
Mm-hmm.
know that just a PM role is not going to cut it, then I would suggest removing PM and just stick with
Okay.
senior PM. Because the goal of any of this is to draw things to you, right? You're creating that light that you're wanting to draw all the insects into, right? So this is a light. This is you turning on something that will draw recruiters or HR pros to you, and you want the right stuff to come your way rather than just a bunch of mess.
Gotcha.
So same thing with the senior consultant position. I would try typing in if you want senior PM consultant, if you want senior IT consultant, provide some clarity. Because again, consulting is huge. You're going to end up with a lot of nonsense coming your way if you make it really generic. So yeah, I would say something that relates to where you want to be going forward.
Okay.
So,
And I saw that they had a senior project, I think project consultant, or I think I saw senior like.
there it is, project management consultant, or yeah, something like that.
Okay.
And you have one more option too. I would max out everything, but you just want to make sure that it's as targeted as possible.
Okay. So I have a couple years of marketing experience.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually have I'm in an interview cycle for a marketing manager position.
Mm.
So, I probably feel like I should probably put the marketing manager on there as well because, I am interested in that. I would love to go to that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think I love the way you're wording this. It's where you're wanting to go, and I was more thinking of where do I feel like I'm the most marketable.
Mm. You want a combination between both, right? It's not either or, it's both and.
Okay.
So you want to think about where you want to be, but you want to think about the qualifications you bring to the table for that because you do have to convince them that you'd be a good fit for that. And
Okay.
you want your content to speak to why you would be an excellent PM, senior IT consultant, and marketing manager, right? Because
Gotcha.
now you've clarified to HR, HR pros and recruiters open to work. Here are the things I'm aiming for. So now it's your job to convince them why you would be the ideal candidate for those roles. If you just plop it on there and don't provide any context or substantial content to prove why marketing manager is listed on there, if it's just kind of like a wish list thing, you're not going
Mm-hmm.
to get much traction.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because nothing on here should be haphazard. It shouldn't be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to add this because I have some experience there. It needs to be thought out so that, especially when you're a job seeker who has multiple targets, because otherwise recruiters are just going to be like, all right, so what do you want? Like, where do you want to be? You know, they have hundreds
Yeah.
of resumes they look through in LinkedIn profiles. So
Yeah.
when someone
And it's
doesn't have
interesting.
direction, they get annoyed.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you say that. I have been asked that in interviews before of you've done marketing, you've done project management, you know, what is your goal?
Right.
What do you want to get to?
Yeah.
And even though my honest answer is I love both and I'm content in either. Like I really enjoy project management a lot. It fits my personality. It's something that I knew early on is something that would be good for me and how I operate in the world outside of professional. It just makes sense.
Right.
And but the marketing stuff is a lot of fun and it suits. I have a creative itch that I like. I love doing creative things. If I get asked what my favorite project is, it's always going to be the ones that had the biggest creativity involved in it.
Right.
And so there is that element of me too. So it's kind of a hard question for me to answer sometimes because I have a pull towards both, but I'm happy in either. And
So
so I'm
yeah.
walking a weird fine line there.
Yeah, and I think that the golden rule for any of that is that if you're in a job interview, you want to tailor your response directly to the job you're applying for. So if they're asking you that question and you answer with something like that, and the job is for a PM role in construction, you've sidelined yourself because you haven't been clear about aiming towards the direction that they're hiring for. You see what I mean? Like
I sure
they
do.
want to hear from you that you are the top 1% candidate for a PM role in construction, but what they're hearing is that you have potentially multiple things you might want to be in, and maybe there's not a 100% direction for what they're looking for. So I would be cautious about, maybe think through your responses and always direct them back to that job.
Gotcha.
I don't want to say don't be honest, but temper the honesty with the knowledge that based on the job description, there may not be a whole lot of creativity based in this
Right.
job. And it may be great that you have a creative mindset, but the reason they're asking you that question is because they're trying to weed you out. They're not just being curious, right? They're not just being like, oh, tell us about yourself. We want to know more. They're trying to figure out, how can we move on to the next candidate? We got a full day of interviews. All right. So is Bradley the right one or is he not? So just keep that in mind, that these interviews are a way to weed people out, and that you're always, I don't want to say always, but it's helpful in your mind to think through the fact that they probably already have an internal candidate in mind. Okay. They probably already have someone internally that they may want to push into this role. You're competing with that candidate. And if that candidate already knows the company culture, already has a solid understanding of the PM expectations at that company, then showing that you aren't 100% sure about the direction you want to go isn't putting that best foot forward towards saying, I am the perfect person for this role. Does that make sense?
Yep. Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've kind of went ahead and started moving down to the
Very short.
about section.
The about section. The about section is super important.
Okay.
Because if you're someone who has clarified in your open to work section that you're open to IT consulting, PM work, and marketing management, then you need this about section to be doing way more work.
Okay.
And it would be helpful to have a breakdown of your strengths for those 3 targets, right? If you
Okay.
keep it very high level and very broad, the only time I keep things high level is for executives, because a lot of their work speaks for themselves. A lot of times they don't need to be as direct. And it's kind of, there's expectations that if they are too direct, that it creates some problems for them. But that's a different level. But for you, I would definitely suggest having a breakdown of those 3 targets. And I know
Okay.
that you mentioned here integration across industries. I would clarify the industries.
Okay.
If business analysis isn't necessarily the direction you're taking, then I would shift that to marketing.
Okay.
I think it's good that you've mentioned public and private sector, because that helps broaden out your experience to working with smaller level companies all the way up to the bigs.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of like what I said, you can break it down into like 3 paragraphs or 3 bullet points or however you want to frame it. But providing context for those 3 different targets you have is really going to help out recruiters.
Okay. And I've seen, now this is kind of more on the resume side, but I'm curious if it applies to LinkedIn. One of the big things I've seen that is, it is different from, we'll say 2015, but even in 2020, it really wasn't the talk of on resumes. When you have at the very top kind of a summary, they have talked about how instead of kind of having that summary paragraph, kind of like what you see here, and then kind of listing off your skills, where on resumes, a lot of the talk nowadays is almost giving a value highlights,
Right.
bullet pointed.
Yes.
This is what I've done. This is what value I've brought to the positions I've had so far. Is that similar in the about section of LinkedIn, or is
Yeah.
this a little bit more, is this a little bit different?
This is more targeted. And the
Okay.
reason why is because you have one profile, but you can make multiple resumes for the different targets you have, right? So
Okay.
you can have 2 to 3 different resumes focused on PM work, IT consulting, and marketing management, right? But we only have one profile that we can work with in one platform. So that's the tricky thing that we're working with, is that if you have these different targets, we have to treat them seriously. And we have to assume that a recruiter or an HR pro at some point is going to have whichever version of your resume you've sent off, and they're going to hop on your profile and they're going to be like, where's the marketing? I don't see any marketing, right? You have sent a job application in for marketing and I see that you mention marketing, but I don't see any content here that proves why I need to talk to you. I see a lot of PM stuff. So
Gotcha.
we want to think from that perspective of whichever audience you're wanting to draw your way. That's good. You've drawn them in. Now, how are you convincing them to want to talk to you?
Okay.
So that's why I suggest and they could be bullet points. They could be just short paragraphs, but it needs to be pretty direct in terms of the targets that you have, the ideal job titles you're aiming for, and then your qualifications for those specific goals. The thing I like
Okay.
about the about section as well is that you can add a little more personality. So you can clarify why you have these 3 targets, right? My creative drive, combined with my ability to, lead projects has led me to do XYZ, right? And then you can kind of pull it together in a way that's very relatable, very personable, rather than it just being like, yep, I have these 3 things I like and, hire me,
Right.
So,
Okay. So what I'm hearing here is, it sounds like longer, more targeted is better. And not, because I heard you say that immediately. It's like, oh, that's short.
it's for sure.
Yeah. So don't be afraid for this to be a longer section
Mm-hmm.
of your profile, because you're
Yes.
really starting to target where you're wanting to go and what you've done and what value you can bring.
And you want to think of every piece of content in your profile as being something that is going to populate in the algorithm and draw people to you. So
Gotcha.
the more content you have in there that relates to how you want to get found, the better.
Gotcha.
The only reason why you wouldn't want to put as much information in there is, like I said, for some executives, for people in finance, also sometimes you'll look at their profiles and they have like nothing. That's just an industry expectation.
Okay.
But for you as a job seeker, been in multiple industries, you have multiple job targets, you want the algorithm to work for you. You want people to be drawn to your profile and to be convinced that you would be someone they want to talk to.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is great. Okay, so we can keep going.
Yeah.
So I have my certifications here, just the just so people see that they're up to date if they want to.
Good.
Especially the PMP. That's the one that I will not let expire because I do
Good.
not want to take that test again.
I have heard it's
And
brutal. I've heard many people fail the first time or second time.
yes, it's a tough process,
Mm.
and I'm very thankful to have it, and I'll make sure that it renews every 3 years on the dot. But I make sure that I put in the new one every time I get a new one, so that they can see I think you can see the expiration date on here, down here at the bottom, so they can even see, hey, this expires in 2027, so I am up to date.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't lost it or anything like that. Um, okay, so we can move on to experience, and I'll pass the experience of, I do have the podcast as because it's present, so it's at the top right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's talking about the podcast and all of that. And I've had a couple podcasts, so you'll see those sprinkled in. And I do bring those up from time to time in interviews,
Mm-hmm.
to try to add value to companies and to try to show them, like, hey, I know I'm here for project management, but because I do have experience in other things, I am willing to help other groups and
Mm.
add extra value to your company. And one of the ways I can show that is say, hey, look, I've had a podcast for that one was about 7 years, the first one, and then this one I'm going on a few months. So I at least I have that down below when you get down to like my marketing. If they ever went this far,
Mm-hmm.
which is a good question to ask. I made all this content when I was the marketing manager, and so I
Right.
posted all the links to it so that people can see all the different things that I made
Good.
or created.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what would be your rule of thumb when it comes to experience sections of LinkedIn? Is it an extension of your, which for me a lot of times this is an extension of my resume basically.
Mm.
If
Mm-hmm.
I've changed my resume as far as like different bullet points, sometimes I'll leave in more here than on the resume, cuz resumes can get really long if you do
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
But if I've had it at one point on my resume, it's probably been here. But what would you say the rule of thumb is, time frame wise,
Mm-hmm.
uh, bullet points? What would be your
Yeah.
recommendations there?
Yeah. So yeah, the LinkedIn should definitely be an extension of the resume. You are able to put more context into LinkedIn as well, and also if you want to speak in first person, you can.
Mm,
You don't have to. You can just use third person and kind of keep it very direct and include, action verbs. That's fine as well. It can be helpful to clarify also, and the reason I'm going to mention this is because you've had multiple short stints,
mm-hmm,
which can weird out recruiters sometimes because they're looking to
mm-hmm,
place people who stay in roles long term, or else sometimes they can lose benefits right from their end. So you may want to clarify, provide very brief, concise, professional clarification on, if the 7 months was due to a contract beginning and ending, Things like that, just to help ease their concerns before talking to you about the roles you've been in being shorter amounts of time.
Okay. Should that be like a bullet point at the end or at the beginning?
I would put that at the beginning. You want them, so the best rule of thumb is to think through the red flags first. You want to pick up on, why would someone count me out? Why are they going to look at my profile and not give me the time of day? Why are they going to ghost me? And you want to look at that right in the face, like first thing, so that you're not tiptoeing around it or beating around the bush. You're addressing it directly. And so if you have the ability to think through a professional explanation, something very short, very brief, to the point, about why the role was so short. And again, it could just be you were hired for one project or two projects and those projects ended. That's completely fine. But it is important to provide some clarification, on that, so that you're not looking like a job hopper. Because that's going to be one of the number one things that recruiters are going to be weirded out by, is job hopping.
Okay. I've also seen on the resume space, one of the big things I've seen pop up, and I've even had this comment on my resume, is having a short explanation of what the company did.
Yes. Yeah, that can be very helpful.
Okay. So would you recommend having that in here as well, to say, this is what Novus Consulting, for instance, did as a company, and then here's what I did while I was there. Here's why I left, those type of things?
Yes. Yeah, that can be really helpful, especially because, like I said, consulting is so big. Are we talking about, EPC, working with an EPC firm? Are we talking about construction, manufacturing? I know you mentioned oil and gas with Novus, but a lot of consulting firms are diversified. They, a lot of times, will not only work with one sector. Sometimes they'll work with multiple. So it can be helpful to clarify, because you also mentioned, IT strategy, data infrastructure. So knowing what Novus Consulting covers can be helpful for a recruiter to know, okay, yes, he has X number of years of experience working in, consulting with XYZ sectors.
Gotcha. Okay. So in terms of time frames, is there, so I know the kind of rule of thumb with resumes, a lot of times that you'll hear is, try to keep it within the last, say, 10 years of experience. Is there any kind of rule with that on LinkedIn, or is this kind of the ability to leave this kind of information? So this was my very first job out of college, right? The marketing support specialist.
Baker, yeah.
So would that be something where it's really not relevant now because I've had so much experience before? Or is it perfectly fine to leave these older jobs like this on your on LinkedIn, and it really is not that big of a deal?
Yeah. So the litmus test for picking up on if you want to leave it or take it off is it going to support my goal of getting X, Y, or Z job going forward? Another reason why I would tell you to keep it is because it absolutely does support the fact that you have X number of years working in marketing or project management, which two of those are goals that you have here going forward. So if you had Pizza Hut on there, I would say, take it off, Brad. But, you don't. You have something on there that links to oil and gas, which is a sector you've been in, marketing support, and PM work. So, that actually is going to help you out in the algorithm. That'll help you come up higher in searches. And it's absolutely no problem that it goes all the way back to 2008. In fact, it shows a, long history of working in this type of work, which is excellent.
Right. I'm not going to say I'm not a little disappointed that you don't want me to put my experience at Grappado's. It was a deli in my hometown that I worked at when I was 16. the very first job. A little disappointed in that. I made a mean Italian sandwich. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Not unless you want people to start reaching out for you making Italian sandwiches. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Well, I guess that kind of comes to the end of the profile. Is there anything else? Is there any sections that maybe I didn't?
Yeah. Go to your skills.
Well, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, you have education, which is good. I saw that you have your education listed. You do want to, so click on your education, go up. Click on the little pencil. Click on the pencil for O State. Okay. Okay, erase that. Erase the Bachelor of Science. Okay, there we go. Go down to the type in Bachelor of Science again. Okay, go down to the second one. Click that.
Okay.
Okay, so I would really caution anyone from creating their own entry. You want to use the entries and do the same thing for marketing. Click on marketing. It should pop up. There you go. Now use their entry for marketing. So the goal is that you don't want to just type something in that doesn't link to an auto-populated option. You want to use their parameters because that's how the algorithm is going to help pick you up. If you just type something in and save it and you haven't looked at what they're providing to link to it, then it's going to be more challenging for you to get traction, especially for things like education, because that's going to be a hard stop for people. You can choose to include the year or not. It's up to you. The year honestly doesn't really matter. It's more having the marketing degree.
Okay, so is it mostly these top 3 that people would look at the most? Are they looking at anything? I mean, I can see where media, especially if you are in like a, I don't know, journalism class, or you were in a architecture class and you have a portfolio there, or
sure, but it was from all the way back in 2008. I mean, it'd be better to just have it in your work experience section. Things that you did during your bachelor's all the way back, over 20 years ago, essentially, is not going to matter as much to a recruiter. They just want to know you have the degree, because you basically want to look at, do the same thing for master. You want to look. This is the
one. I don't know if they'll have this.
Yeah, does it have to be entertainment business? Okay, media management, maybe.
The actual degree was entertainment business, but
why is it a Master of Science? Was it in the College of Science?
I think it was science. Maybe it was Master of
Arts.
I may be wrong here.
Yeah, you may want to double check that. You may look up your degree.
Okay.
Because you also want to be. It's not necessarily like they're going to go digging of what your master's, if you have an MA or an MS, but sometimes they will, because if they're looking at a job description or they've created a job description, sometimes they want a specific type of degree.
Gotcha. Okay. I thought it was science, but I'll double check that and make sure that I.
Yeah, it would surprise me if that degree is housed under the College of Science.
Okay.
Is this a for-profit university, Full Sail? It's not a public university, right? It doesn't sound like
know. It's not a public university.
Was it online?
I don't know if it was online. Okay. But they have a campus down in Orlando.
Okay.
Where they have your traditional classes and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if it's for profit or not right off the bat.
Okay. No, the only reason I asked that is because for-profit universities tend to have different ways of structuring what goes under what. Gotcha. It's different from how public universities typically house their degrees. So,
okay.
Okay, then you have licenses, certifications, good. You have your projects listed, good. Okay, and then
I need to update my projects. These are all old.
These are old.
I can put more projects in there.
Yeah, add new ones if you have them.
Okay.
Okay, and then max out all of your skills. So I know you have 89, so max them out all the way to 100. And just be mindful again, if you have host, media, producer, content development, online content creation, that one is okay because it'll still link to marketing management.
Mm-hmm.
But I would, again, kind of caution you against just using terms that link to what you've done instead of things that link to what you want to do. Because you're jumping between electrical project management to media producer, right? For a recruiter, it's going to look a little wonky. So
yeah,
you just want to be mindful of how you fit.
Okay.
So
yeah, I've got some work to do on this.
It doesn't mean you can't be a unicorn. It just means that you have to be mindful that if you're branding yourself as a unicorn, that you have the right answers to the questions they're going to ask.
Right.
And that you are giving them the content they need to see you as an ideal candidate for the positions, the one position they're trying to fill. And you have branded yourself for multiple ones. So you just want to make sure that you're not providing even more weirdness for them from their perspective, right?
Okay. And you said there's a max of 100 that you can add here.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. There's 100 now. So I always suggest maxing it out to the full 100. And just, again, thinking through those extra, 11 skills from the perspective of I'm aiming for PM work, IT, consulting, and marketing management. Okay,
Gotcha.
so always using the skills that auto-populate as well, not creating your own skills.
Gotcha. Okay. Mm-hmm. So then we have recommendations.
Good. Those are great.
Languages.
Mm-hmm.
I am a part of PMI.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The rest is good. It's just, interests you have. Those aren't really going to be a big deal unless you have, interests linked to extreme political views or something that could potentially create some weirdness for somebody who's looking at your profile. But I always recommend that people kind of stay away from being public about their personal views on LinkedIn and just keep it strictly professional. Keep all the personals to Facebook.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there any section that maybe I haven't added that you would think would be?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that you've added everything visually and content-wise that you can. You even have your featured section built out. You have some content in the featured section is what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is good.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think that about covers it. I think that you have a really solid profile here. I think that just thinking from that recruiting perspective of that audience, I think just do a little brainstorming about how that may be coming across in terms of your candidacy, right? For those types of roles.
No, that sounds good. Go ahead and stop sharing. Well, thank you for walking through that. I know I've got some work to do there.
Honestly, not that much work. Yeah, honestly, really not that much work. It's your about section, I think, and your headline. I think those two could do just a little tweaking.
Okay. So what would you say? So as we're kind of, we've gone a little long, but I want to keep all this because that was great information. So what would you say in the profiles that you've seen is probably the biggest mistakes that people make in it? I know some have pictures that look like the Facebook profile. I've seen that. I've seen people that have pictures that are clearly from 30 years ago.
Yes, that
on
is
there.
very common.
Are there any of the major mistakes that you've seen that are pretty fixable that does make people way more marketable?
Honestly, the targeting, just like what I kind of pointed out with your profile, the biggest mistake is always targeting. It's always not thinking from the perspective of who's going to be reading it, and instead thinking from the perspective of what you've done. And that is 99.9% of the time the thing that's going to get people from getting the right types of traction coming their way.
Okay.
Just because once you've created that targeting and direction, people will be able to find you and you'll get pulled for more positions. Sometimes there are things that are outside your control. If they see shorter stints of work as job hopping and you get ghosted without even knowing that that's what's going on, that's something that's kind of outside your control. And that's kind of why I mentioned providing some clarification on why that role was potentially shorter than a year or only barely a year. So that then you're kind of working backwards to think about, why would I get counted out? Okay, let me provide some clarification for that.
Okay. I definitely have had to answer that question.
Yeah, you will.
A couple times.
Yeah.
And normally it's a pretty easy answer. I did have a contract. I only left one because it was a bad fit. And then the rest were kind of different opportunities or a contract or something like that. So,
right.
But I love that you have the clarification so that they can see it. If they do look at your profile, they can see it.
Right.
So
yeah, you're just, LinkedIn is an introduction to you, right? From someone who has no idea who you are or what you do. And they have hundreds of other people that they're going to be looking at for one role over the coming weeks. And you don't want to give them a reason to pass up on you and look at someone else. So
Gotcha.
that's the goal, that the mantra you kind of want to keep in mind when you're building out your profile is, okay, this needs to be, an encapsulated idea of how I would want to introduce myself at a networking event, or what are the things I do want to get across that seem to be stumbling blocks for me when I hit interviews, and how can I provide clarification before someone even meets me to clarify my fit for these types of roles. And that's doing that work, looking at those things kind of dead in the face and being like, I hate seeing this thing and I hate that I keep running into this wall. So that's why I'm going to address it now. That 100% will get you way more traction, because then you're not avoiding the weirdness, you're leaning into it.
Sounds good. Well, Amanda, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for your time and for walking through that. I know that's going to be helpful for a lot of people, because, it's certainly helpful for me. You think you're doing it right, but you don't really know what you don't know. And so that's really good information. So I know you're pretty specialized in oil and gas specifically. And correct me if I'm wrong there, but
I do broader energy, manufacturing, industrial. Yeah, it's all the intersections that come off of oil and gas too that I've worked with. So
okay,
I've even worked with people in the finance space, IT, of course. There's a whole lot of intersections.
Okay, so if someone wanted to reach out to you and get some of your services, where can they find you, and how would they go about that?
Yeah, well, they can find me on LinkedIn. That is a really good place to kind of look me up, see if I'd be the right fit to reach out to. My profile is Amanda Rico, PhD, with the dots and the PhD. So they can look me up there. They can also email me at rico.editorial@gmail.com. So that's another way that they can reach out to me. Typically very quick on email. And yeah, those are the core ways that are excellent ways to find me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for spending I know I went over, but
No
I
worries.
was loving every bit of it. So thank you so much. And hopefully we can get you back down the road for another one of the things that you specialize on, because I could sit here and learn from you all day. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd love to come back. And, I do anything really job seeking related. So
Sounds
good for
good.
that.
Well, I hope you have a good day.
Thanks.
We'll
You
talk soon.
too. Bye,
Okay.
Bradley.
Bye. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. I want to thank Amanda for coming on and, quite frankly, for being nice to me about my profile. If you, especially if you are in the oil and gas industry, are looking for someone to help you along your job search journey, I highly recommend you reach out to Amanda. She is amazing and can help you in so many ways. If this is the first episode you've ever listened to, thank you. If you've listened to all 10 of these episodes, thank you, thank you, thank you. But I need your help. If you know someone who is going through a job search, please share this podcast with them in hopes that this helps them with their job search journey. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us get in front of more people, helps us get more in the algorithm, and it's just an overall help to the entire podcast. Same if you're listening to this on Spotify or any other podcast platform, hitting that like button, giving it a review just helps me get in front of more people. But with that, I'll go ahead and leave you for this episode. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.